Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever this may find you. And I hope it finds you in a good place. A good place. So, as you can see, this conversation is about discipline of children. We got it wrong, folks. We got it wrong. And we've been doing it wrong. And it's really time for us to get it right before it's too late. This is not going to be a comfortable conversation for most, but it will be a meaningful conversation to all. To all. And I am confident in believing that those who are willing to hear with openness will be able to receive it as it is meant to be received. All right, here we go. When he was governor, Vice President Prince, when he was governor over his state, he had passed a law that you can use biblical scripture as defense. Well, there was a woman who had beaten her child to such a degree she was arrested. Badly, buckles, like bruises and all kinds of stuff. And so she decided that she's going to use biblical scripture as her defense. And the biblical scripture that she quoted was spare the rod, spoil a child. Well, the problem with that is spare the rod, spoil a child is not a biblical scripture at all. Spare the rod, spoil a child from a guy named Samuel Butler from the 1600s. He wrote a 3-series book called, I know I'm going to pronounce it wrong, so let me just spell it. It's spelled Hudibras. You can research that. And if you know how to pronounce it, well, I guess you can't tell me because if you just type it, I won't be able to get it. But nonetheless, it's a 3-part series. He first wrote it in 1963. He did another series in 1664, and the last is 1678. Well, the one we want to focus on is the 1664. That was the one that Spare the Rod, Spoil a Child is written in. And what it comes from is part of a sexual deviant poem, because that particular part was dealing with a fetish. And when you look at his history of even writing that, he was actually making fun of the Bible. It is said that his parents were very religious and maybe strict. So that was his way of getting back. Nonetheless, the story in this particular series, at this particular poem, is about a guy who gets locked up. It's going to sound real familiar. Like, down in 1600. Now, we in 2020. Now, look how this sounds, how this works out, even to this day. Well, nonetheless, he gets locked up. He's trying to get out. So he started making, pleas to these different women. Like, I need you to help me get out. I'll love you forever if you do. Women like, please, I ain't with that. But one woman was a little, maybe he is for real. So she decided, okay, well, I'll get you out and you'll hang yourself till you almost die. And I'll cut you down, and that showed me that you love me. So, excuse me, if you see me looking around, that's because I am in an area I'm not too familiar with, and so I'm trying to keep my eyeballs alert. But nonetheless, so he said, "Oh, that's too harsh. I didn't want to hang myself. That's a little too much." So he said, "Okay, well, I'll get you out, and you'll spank yourself to a certain degree, or I'll spank it to a certain degree, and from that, it'll prove that you love me." So he's like, "Okay." So she get him out, and he took off. Now, this was the 1600s, and dudes taking off on women as they do now. So any woman watching this, take heed if you got somebody locked up. Take heed. That's all I'm saying. So nonetheless, spare the rod, spoil a child is not biblical scripture. It's a guy just making fun of the Bible in the sexual deviant poem. All right, now let's move over to the Bible. When God had enlightened me with this information, is the reason why I have to enlighten you with it, and not because I was instructed to, for one, but also I feel if I know something, I'm going to tithe off of it, mainly if it's something beneficial. But nonetheless, the Bible, and I think it's 29:13 where that particular part of the scripture is talking about discipline. Well, it doesn't say, as we know, spare the rod, spoil a child, but what it does say is spare not the rod, at least each child should die. And what that means is assert your authority. Because in this instant, rod, rod is used 190 times in the Bible, 40 times it means the actual rod or staff or stick. But in this case, it doesn't. It means your authority. So it's saying you to spare not your authority, or at least your child will die, meaning that a child can go wayward and lose his life. But if you assert your authority early on, then you don't have the issue of the child getting wild, going wayward. And a lot of people don't even understand that the education for a child starts at conception, not when they 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, at conception. And that's probably why the Asians probably got it down packed, because that's the first ones I've known to, when they assert like a couple of months, they'll put earphones on their belly and play music and things of that nature and sounds. And when they get further along, they put speakers on, headphones on, where the word is pronounced and then spelled. So the vibrations and understanding, the child is getting this knowledge. But nonetheless, let's go back. So anyway, so it's saying, to spare not your authority, use your authority. And a lot of you may know what this is, because a lot of you, like in my household, though it was very abusive, I mean, belts, stench, of course, sorority boys, what we got hit with. So I'm not somebody that grew up in this perfect household that you didn't even get spanked on the hand. We got tore down. Forgave in death, forgave one in death and one in life. As that was still living, but nonetheless, just want to put it out there, so I don't want you to think that she lived this thing, she never got hit, so she don't understand. Oh, I understand. So nonetheless, so it's just saying, assert your authority, because in my household, even though there was physical punishment, there was also that look, you get that look like, they turn around and you already know, so that's the type of thing. So nonetheless, that's what it means. And in the latter part, you will also see where it says beateth the child with a rod. Now, beateth means continue, because when you beat, it's a continuous motion. It's a continuous repetition of something. And that's what it's talking about. It's like having continued, taking a continued stance with your authority. So it's not taking and just whipping. That's not even what it's saying. It's saying that be consistent. Be repetitive in exerting your authority. So that's what it means. And so when I was asking God, how do we get this wrong? How do we get it wrong? He said, because the majority of you have learned from generational understanding, not biblical knowledge. And I said, well, how will we know? And I said, because like at the beginning part of Proverb is direct language. And evidently the latter part, as he's stating and having me to understand, is not direct language. And I said, well, how will we know? He said, the consistency through the Bible. He said, let me give you some examples. He said, the shepherd boy, he had a rod. He didn't beat them sheep. He guided them with it. The same thing with God and Adam in the Garden of Eden. What did he do? He didn't beat Adam and Eve, and he chastised them with his authority from being disobedient. He also made mention that, and I think, was it John? Oh, Lord, and I'm not, oh my goodness, this scripture's skipping me. Hopefully while I'm talking, it'll come to me. But how when slave owners, beat the slaves died, he held them accountable as a murderer. So he was saying that wasn't his intention. We misunderstood because of the generational understanding. That's not what he meant. Also, I was also asking him, I said, well, how can we be more sure when something is direct language? He said, well, he said, just say if you thought it was direct language, and just say if it was direct language, you still would be out of order, because what it says in there, fathers discipline your sons. It doesn't say father discipline your daughters. It doesn't say father discipline your children. And it doesn't say mothers discipline anybody. So once again, it will be out of order. So I said, well, what do we do now? Like some people have done it, some people are doing it. So what do we do now? He said, well, I want you to make sure they understand that I'm not chastising them for learning wrong. However, once they get this information, they have to humbly come to me ask for forgiveness for doing it, and I will ask somebody forgiveness for doing it, and their slate to be clean with me. If they're doing it, to stop, come to me, ask forgiveness for doing it, and their slate is clean with me. If they haven't done it, don't do it, and their slate is stay clean. Otherwise, they cannot ascend. So just know that, you know, even learning wrong has its repercussions. So a lot of times we have to seek the truth at all times. So if you're listening, if you're still listening, and you're not sure, that's fine. That's fine. It should be able to reach you, because God said the truth will do two things: exalt, and it'll stir you up, and enlighten you and stir you up. So it what is it? Exalt and exhort and exalt you. So if it didn't do that, what I would suggest, like I said, you can Google, look it all up. But however, the best way to know is just clearly sit with God and say, Felicia said this. Is it true? That's all you got to do. You'll get your answer. So hopefully you all be able to accept this and with openness, and be able to process it to wherever it may fit in your life, and do what you know you need to do. And again, it's not about guilt. It's not about pointing fingers. It's not about saying a person is a bad parent who have done it because they learned wrong, but to continue to do when you know right. That's the problem. So again, and you know, so even if you don't know, it's still an issue. Don't get me wrong, it's still an issue, but it's a bigger issue when you have been given the truth and you still go another way. So I just want to say that, and hopefully, you know, a lot of people will be blessed by this information. Like I said, I know it's probably not the easiest thing to hear when you done learn something and you done acted in it. But again, just know God said your slate is clean if you stop and humbly come to him, or just come to him humbly if you already have stopped, and ask forgiveness. So, you know, we can all be in a good place. So, again, thank you all for taking the time to listen. And maybe all will be blessed. And if it's at night, peace will dream and sweet awakenings to you. And if it's during the day, may your day continue to be blessed. Bye-bye.